She had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times. Every version ended the same way, with her in control, with the right words lined up and ready, with enough distance between her and the truth to survive the telling. Every version was a lie. Because now he was standing in her bathroom doorway, Adrien Caruso, the man whose name made grown men go pale in the middle of sentences, and his eyes weren't on her face. They were lower, and the look on his face wasn't all anger, it wasn't accusation. It was the look of a man who had just watched 4 months of careful, deliberate silence collapse into a single undeniable second. "Tell me who the father is." His voice was so quiet she almost didn't hear it. She almost wished she hadn't. If your heart is already in your throat, you're exactly where I need you. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and drop your city in the comments right now, because I want to see how far this story travels before it's done. Stay with me. Every single minute of this is worth it. The notice was taped to her door at 7:43 in the morning. Natalie knew the exact time because she had been standing on the other side of that door for 6 minutes already. One hand on the knob, coat half on crackers in her bag, because her stomach couldn't handle anything else before 10 a.m. anymore, working up the simple, ordinary courage it took to start another day. She opened the door and nearly walked into it. Notice of eviction, 30 days to vacate. She stood there in the hallway and read it once, read it twice. The fluorescent light above her hummed its one long, tired note. Somewhere down the hall, a baby was crying. Not her baby, not yet, but soon, God help her, soon. She folded the paper in half, put it in her coat pocket, walked to the elevator. And somewhere between the 3rd floor and the lobby, Natalie Brooks made herself a promise. "I will not fall apart today. I will not fall apart today. I will not fall apart today." The elevator doors opened. She walked out into the cold. She kept the promise, barely. $412. That was the number she came back to all day, at the flower shop, trimming stems with scissors that needed sharpening, wrapping bouquets for people who were celebrating things she couldn't afford to think about right now. $412, 22 hours a week, and a body that was already starting to betray her plans in ways she couldn't hide much longer. She was 16 weeks pregnant. She had told exactly one person. And the one person she would never, under any circumstances, under any pressure, under any version of this story, she was willing to live, the one person she would never tell, was the father. "You're doing that thing again," said Marcus from the other side of the work table. He was 19, worked weekends and Wednesday afternoons, and had the particular gift of noticing things that were none of his business. "What thing?" "The thing where you arrange flowers like they personally offended you." Natalie looked down. She had in fact crushed a peony stem clean in half without realizing it. "I'm fine," she said. "You've said that every day this week." "Because every day this week I've been fine." Marcus looked at her the way 19-year-olds look at adults who are obviously lying, with a pity that is somehow worse than judgment. She threw the broken stem in the trash and reached for another. She got home at 6:15, sat at her kitchen table with the eviction notice unfolded in front of her, and did the math again. She did the math the way people do things they already know the answer to, not because they expect a different result, but because the act of calculating gives the illusion of control. The math said the same thing it had said that morning. The math said she was out of time. She pressed both palms flat against the table, breathed, felt the tiny, insistent flutter below her ribs that had been waking her at 3 a.m. for the past 2 weeks. Not painful, not frightening, just there, a presence so new and so enormous that some mornings she still couldn't quite make herself believe it was real. Her phone was on the table. She stared at it. She knew what the sensible thing was. She knew what a woman with resources and support systems and people in her corner would do. She would make the call. She would say the words. She would let the father of her child know that in approximately 5 months, a life was coming into the world that had his blood in it. She picked up the phone. She put it back down. "I can't," she said aloud, to the phone, to the empty kitchen, to the flutter below her ribs. "I'm sorry, I can't." Because the father of her child was not a man you called with news. He was a man you braced for. He was a man whose involvement in your life was not a matter of degree, it was a matter of total, irreversible transformation. You did not invite Adrien Caruso into your situation. You surrendered to him, And Natalie Brooks had spent 29 years building a life she could call her own, and she was not going to hand it over now. Not even for this. Especially not for this. She had met him at a charity gala she had no business being at. 7 months ago. Margaret's flower contract, the biggest job of the year. And Natalie had been brought along to manage the setup because Margaret's back was bad, and she trusted Natalie more than she trusted anyone else she'd ever employed, which was either a compliment or a burden, depending on the evening. The job was simple. Carry the arrangements in, set them on the tables, get the signed receipt, leave before 10, be home by 10:30, wake up the next morning and be the same person you were before. She was carrying the last arrangement, white orchids, heavy, the kind of vase that made your arms shake, after 3 minutes when she came around a corner and walked directly into a wall that turned out to be a man. The vase lurched. Her heart stopped. Two hands appeared from nowhere and caught it. Steady, immediate, like he'd been expecting it. "Easy," he said. She looked up. He was tall, dark, the kind of face that had seen things and not been broken by them, or had been broken, and was simply very good at the reconstruction. A tuxedo that sat on him the way money sits on certain men, not a costume, but a second skin. She said, "I'm so sorry, I didn't see. The vase is fine." "Are you sure if it had broken, it didn't break?" "Right, but you're still apologizing." She closed her mouth. Something moved in his expression. Not amusement exactly, something quieter than amusement, something that paid attention. "Adrien," he said, and held the vase out. She took it. Their fingers overlapped for exactly 1 second on the glass. "Natalie," she said. He nodded, like he was filing it somewhere he planned to keep it. She walked away and told herself firmly, clearly, out loud inside her own head, that that was all that was going to happen. She was here to work. She was not here to be looked at by men in tuxedos in back hallways. She was not here for any of this. She found him beside her at the bar 40 minutes later. "The orchids look good," he said. "Thank you." "You arranged them." "I did." "They're better than last year's." She looked at him sideways. "You noticed last year's arrangements." "I noticed things." A beat. "I noticed you about 10 minutes before you walked into me." The candor was so unexpected that she laughed, a real laugh, not a polite one, and the sound of it surprised her almost as much as it seemed to surprise him. That was the beginning. That single, stupid, genuine laugh. She would spend a long time afterward wishing she could take it back. 3 months, that was how long she let it be real. 3 months of a man who called when he said he would, who listened in a way that felt like being held, who never once made her feel small or conditional, or like she was occupying borrowed space in his attention. 3 months of a version of herself she liked, easier in her own body, less braced against the next thing, capable of sleeping through the night without cataloging every variable. She knew something was off by the end of the first month. Knew it the way you know a sound is wrong before you can identify what it is. The security that materialized around him in certain restaurants. The calls he took outside, voice dropping 10 degrees the moment he thought she wasn't listening. The way a room changed when he entered it, not the way rooms change for celebrities or powerful men, but the way they change for something that has weight, something that commands. She started paying attention. And then one Sunday afternoon, Rita Vasquez sat across from her at her own kitchen table and said Natalie's name in the voice she reserved for things that required whiskey, and Natalie said, "Just say it," and Rita said, "Adrien Caruso," as in Caruso. "I know who he is." "Do you?" Rita pushed a folded newspaper across the table. Natalie looked at the headline. A federal investigation ongoing. Associates unnamed under the surveillance. Connections to the Port Authority. To construction contracts. To 3 union officials who had, in the past 4 years, stopped being available for comment in ways that were never fully explained. Natalie read it all the way through, folded the paper, set it down. "How deep?" she asked. "Deep enough," Rita said quietly, "that walking away is the only intelligent thing you can do." Silence. "And deep enough," Rita continued even more quietly, "that walking away might not be entirely up to you." That landed somewhere cold. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Rita paused, choosing words with the care of a woman who understood their weight. "I mean that men like him don't lose things. They don't accept it. Whatever you think this is, whatever he has let it look like, he is not a man who will simply let you go because you ask nicely. Natalie sat with that for a long time. Then she went home and she called him, and she said the things you say when the real reason is too true and too frightening for words. I need space. Things move too fast. I'm not in the right place. She waited for him to push back, argued with his silence in her head, building responses to objections he hadn't made yet. He said, "If that's what you need," and that was it. She walked away. She thought it was over. She was spectacularly wrong. 6 weeks later, Thursday morning, bathroom floor. The test in her hand was redundant. By then, she had known for 3 days in the way bodies sometimes know things before tests confirm them. A deep cellular certainty that sits below rational thought and simply waits. She sat on the floor for a long time. Her first thought was his name. Her second thought, arriving hard on his heels, cold and clarifying as ice water was, he cannot know. She made the decision right there, on the bathroom floor. Before she cried, before she called Rita, before she did anything else at all. She made it with a clarity that felt almost violent in its simplicity. I am doing this alone. My child will not grow up inside a war. My child will not inherit enemies. My child will be free. She got up off the floor, washed her face, and started building a life that could survive without him. 8 weeks became 12. 12 became 16. She told Rita on a Tuesday, brace for the storm. Rita held her hands and cried first, which was so unexpected that Natalie cried too. And for 10 minutes, neither of them spoke because neither of them needed to. Then Rita looked at her eyes, still wet, voice careful. He's going to find out. He won't. Natalie, listen to me. Men like him have people whose entire job is knowing things. You cannot. He won't. She said it quietly, but absolutely. Because I'm not going to tell him. And we're done. And he has no reason to. He doesn't need a reason. Rita squeezed her hands. That's what you're not understanding. He doesn't operate on reasons. He operates on something else entirely. The words followed Natalie home. She put them in the same place she put everything she couldn't afford to feel yet. Somewhere in the back. Somewhere with a door. And then the eviction notice. And then the apartment search. 3 days of phone calls that went nowhere, listings that evaporated, numbers that didn't match reality. The particular humiliation of being told over and over in the polite language of voicemails and email rejections that what she could afford was not a thing that existed. The fourth evening, couch covered in papers, feet swollen, the flutter below her ribs more insistent now, more real, a whole person already becoming themselves in the dark. Her phone rang, unknown number. She almost didn't answer. Natalie. One word. Her name. His voice. The room contracted. How did you get this number? Her voice stayed level. She was genuinely amazed it stayed level. I've always had your number. I changed it in August. A pause. I know. She felt the floor shift beneath her. Not literally. Something worse than literally. How long? She asked. Her voice had changed now, lower, harder. How long have you been? What exactly have you been doing, Adrien? Keeping you safe. I didn't ask you to do that. No. Then what gives you the right? I heard about the eviction notice. The words stopped in her throat. I can help, he said. No. Natalie. No. Harder, sharper. A word with edges. You don't get to monitor my life and then appear to rescue me from it. That is not something I will accept. Are you listening to me? I am not something you manage. A silence. Long enough that she thought for one desperate second that she had actually reached him. You're right, he said. She blinked. You're right, he said again calmly. I overstepped. I should have asked. Yes, you should have. And you would have said no. Correct. So I didn't ask. A beat, so brief she almost missed what it contained. That doesn't mean the problem goes away. She pressed her hand flat against her stomach, a reflex so automatic she didn't notice she'd done it until it was done. Don't notice that. Please don't notice that yet. I'm handling it, she said. You're surviving it. Same thing. It's not the same thing. His voice was quiet again, not gentle exactly, but something adjacent, something that had weight. Not for someone like you. She didn't answer. Let me help, he said again. Not because you owe me anything, not because of what we were, because he stopped. The pause was 2 seconds long, but inside those 2 seconds lived something she had never heard from him before. A fracture, barely there, barely audible, but there. Because what? She asked before she could stop herself. Because you matter. Simply, directly, like the words had been waiting a long time and were done waiting. You've always mattered, and whatever you think of the world I come from, that's just true. And the silence stretched between them, and in it, the flutter below her ribs, and in it, the eviction notice on the coffee table, and in it, 4 months of a secret that was getting heavier every single day. I don't need your help, she said. I know, he said. Then stop offering it. Okay. Too easy, too quick. The agreement of a man who has not actually agreed at all, who has simply decided that this particular moment is not the one he is choosing. Adrien, take care of yourself, Natalie. The line went dead. She sat there in the silence of her apartment, her hand still pressed flat against her stomach, her heart going in her chest like something that had been startled and couldn't find its way back to calm. He doesn't know, she told herself. He can't know. He would have said something. He would have asked directly. She pressed harder against her stomach, as if she could keep the secret in by force alone. He doesn't know. She found the apartment 2 weeks later. Cheaper, smaller, a building with a buzzer that worked only sometimes, and neighbors who communicated primarily through wall vibrations. But it was hers and it was within reach, and she moved in on a Saturday with Rita and Marcus and a rented truck and the particular grim satisfaction of a woman who has solved her own problem without asking anyone for anything. By the end of the first week, she almost believed she was going to be fine. By the end of the second week, she had started to relax. By the end of the third week, she was standing in her bathroom with both hands braced on the sink, looking at a reflection that was no longer entirely recognizable. The curve undeniable now, the secret worn openly on her body, even if no one who knew had seen it yet, and thinking for the first time in months, something that felt almost like peace. Maybe this works, she thought. Maybe I actually do this. She heard the front door open. Every cell in her body went still. She had locked it. She always locked it. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, unhurried, the footsteps of someone who has never in their life walked into a room they were uncertain of their right to enter. The bathroom doorway filled. Adrien Caruso looked at her, and then just once, just for a fraction of a second, that contained the entirety of everything she had spent 4 months desperately, carefully, exhaustingly protecting. His eyes moved down. 1 second of silence. 2, 3, 4. Tell me who the father is. His voice was almost gentle. That was what undid her, not anger, not accusation, not the hard, commanding tone she could have pushed back against. Just that terrible, intimate quiet. The voice of a man who already knows and is giving you the choice of how this begins. Natalie looked at him, hands still on the sink, back straight, chin up. She thought about lying. She cataloged every version of a lie she could tell in the next 3 seconds. A coworker, an ex, a man he didn't know, a story she could build and maintain and live inside until some other way out presented itself. She looked at his face, and she understood with the finality of a door closing that she had run out of road. You already know, she said. He didn't answer. You already know. She held her voice absolutely steady. That's why you're here. That's why you have a key to my door, and why you know about the eviction, and why you called in October. You've known. For how long have you known? Say it, he said quietly. How long have you, say it. The words cost her something. She felt them leave. It's yours, she said. The room held its breath. Something crossed his face, fast, unguarded, gone, before it fully arrived. But she saw it. In 7 months of knowing this man, she had learned to read the things that lasted only a second, and this one lasted long enough to change everything she thought she understood about what she was dealing with. He wasn't just here because he knew. He was here because it hurt him. The knowing, the months of her silence, the shape of what she'd decided without him. It hurt him. 4 months, he said. Yes. You've known for 4 months. Yeah. And you weren't going to tell me. Not a question, but it required an answer. No, she said, I wasn't. He was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was different, stripped of something, or perhaps stripped of the effort of hiding something, which amounted to the same terrible thing. What, you know why? I want to hear you say it. Because you're dangerous, she said. Not cruelly, just true. Because the people who hate you would use my child to hurt you without a second thought. Because I've read about the Vulov family and what they did too. I know what happens to the people close to you, Adrien. I know what they're capable of. And I chose to keep my child out of it. Even if it cost me everything. Even if it cost me. Her voice broke. Just once. Just at the edge. She pulled it back. Even if it cost me you. The silence that followed was the loudest thing she had ever heard. Adrien looked at her for a long moment. Then he said quietly, absolutely in a voice that would live in her chest for a very long time, our child. 2 words, a correction, a claim, a beginning she hadn't chosen and couldn't take back. Our child, he said again, like he was learning the language of something new. And you were going to raise them alone? I was doing fine. He looked around just briefly, just once at the bathroom of the apartment she'd found Alone moved into. Alone tried to be enough for Alone. And the look on his face was not judgment. It was something far harder to withstand than judgment. It was grief. You were surviving, he said. I told you, same thing. It is not the same thing. He looked back at her directly, steadily. Not for you, not for them. And somewhere underneath all that stubbornness, his voice softened just at the edge. You know that. She couldn't speak. She wanted to argue. She had 17 arguments lined up, organized and ready, because she had been having this conversation in her head for 4 months, and she knew every position and every counterpoint and every response to every response. But he was standing in her bathroom she didn't even know what time it was, with the keys she hadn't given him and knowledge she hadn't shared, and a look on his face that was dismantling things she had spent 4 months building, and all 17 arguments evaporated into the specific silence of a woman who was too tired to keep pretending. What do you want from me? She asked. Her voice cracked. She hated it. She was too tired to hide it. Right now. He didn't move closer, stayed exactly where he was, giving her the distance she realized. Deliberately, consciously, giving her the space to breathe. Right now, I want you to stop carrying this alone. And after right now, he looked at her, and there it was again, that thing she had caught for just a fraction of a second, the fracture in the composure, the man underneath the machinery of what he had made himself into. A man who was underneath all of it, standing in a bathroom in the middle of the night, looking at the woman carrying his child, and feeling for perhaps the first time in longer than he could name something he did not know how to control. Office right now, Adrien Caruso said quietly, we figure out the rest. Together. The flutter below her ribs. The secret finally spoken. The door she had kept closed for 4 months swinging open. And Natalie Brooks standing with her back against the sink, her hands finally dropping from the cold porcelain, her breath unsteady and her eyes burning, and her entire carefully constructed plan in ruins at her feet, looked at the father of her child and understood something she had been running from since the moment she found out. You cannot outrun the people who are determined to find you. And some of them, God help you, are worth being found by. The word together sat in the air between them, like something neither of them knew quite what to do with. Natalie looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked away, not because she was afraid of his face, but because she was afraid of what her own face was doing, and she had already given him enough tonight. She had already handed over the one thing she had spent 4 months protecting with every resource she had, and she was not prepared to also hand over the sight of herself coming undone in the process. You need to leave, she said. Natalie, not forever. She turned back to him, and her voice was steadier now, the steadiness that comes not from calm but from sheer force of will, from a woman who has been steadying herself by force for so long, it has become muscle memory. Just tonight, I need one night to think. He looked at her, that look she was learning to read, the one where he was calculating not the situation but her measuring the distance between what she was asking for and what she actually needed. One night, he said, yes. And tomorrow we talk, properly, like 2 adults who are like 2 people who are going to have to figure something out together. She paused on the word, his word. But right now I need you out of my apartment. A beat. Then he nodded one slow, deliberate nod and stepped back from the doorway. She heard him walk through the apartment, heard the front door open, heard it close. She stood at the sink for 3 full minutes, both hands back on the porcelain head down, breathing. Then she sat on the bathroom floor, the same position, the same cold tile, and she put her hand on her stomach and said very quietly to no one and everyone, I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing. The flutter answered her, small, insistent, entirely unconcerned with her plans. She laughed despite everything. It sounded a little bit like crying. She called Rita at 11:15 that night. Rita answered on the second ring, which meant she had been awake, which meant some part of her had been waiting, because Rita Vasquez had been Natalie's closest friend for 11 years, and she had a gift for anticipating disasters that bordered on the supernatural. He came, Natalie said, silence. Then, when? Tonight. He was in my apartment, Rita. He had a key, I don't know how. I don't know when he was just there. Oh God, he knows. How much does he know? Everything. Natalie's voice was flat. He knows about the pregnancy. He knows it's his. I told him. I didn't plan to, but I told him. A long silence. The kind that contains a great deal of things being decided against being said. How was he? Rita asked carefully. That's the part I can't figure out. Natalie pressed the heel of her hand against her eye. He wasn't angry. I was ready for angry. I had responses prepared for angry. But he was just quiet. And he said, our child, like he was claiming something, and he said together like it was already decided, and then I asked him to leave and he left. And now I'm sitting here trying to figure out if that was the most controlled reaction I've ever seen from a dangerous man, or if something real just happened. It could be both, Rita said. That's not comforting. It wasn't meant to be. A pause. But Natalie, what are you going to do? I said I'd talk to him tomorrow. And then I know. I don't know. She was quiet for a moment. I keep thinking about what you said, about men like him not accepting loss, about how walking away might not be entirely up to me. She swallowed. What if staying is the only way to protect my child? What if fighting him on this just makes everything more dangerous? Or, Rita said very carefully, what if staying is the most dangerous thing of all? Neither of them had an answer for that. They stayed on the phone in silence for another 10 minutes, the way old friends sometimes do not, because words are coming, but because the silence of someone who loves you is better than the silence of an empty room. He was outside her building at 9 the next morning. Not in the lobby, not at the door. Standing across the street, hands in the pockets of a dark coat like a man who had decided that the least threatening version of himself was one that waited to be invited rather than simply arriving. It was a consideration she hadn't expected from him, and it disarmed her in a way that his presence inside her apartment had not. She stood at her window for a moment and looked at him, looking at her building. Then she went downstairs. They walked. His choice, she suspected, but one she accepted because moving felt better than sitting across from each other in her apartment, which was too small for what they needed to sound and too full of the previous night. He didn't speak first. She had expected him to arrive with a plan fully formed the way he seemed to arrive with everything. Instead, he walked beside her and was quiet, and the quiet was not uncomfortable, which unsettled her in its own way. She spoke first. I need you to understand something, she said, before we talk about anything else, before we make any decisions or agreements or whatever this conversation is. I need you to understand one thing clearly. Tell me. I am not going to disappear into your world. She kept walking, kept her eyes forward. I'm not going to become something that gets protected and managed and kept safe behind walls while people I've never met make decisions about my life. I have spent 29 years being the person who decides what happens to me, and that does not end because of, she gestured slightly at her own body, because of this. He was quiet for a moment. I know, he said. You say that like it's simple. It's not simple, he paused. But it's true, I'm not trying to own you, Natalie. I never was. You had a key to my apartment. He stopped, started again. That was wrong, I know that. I told myself it was about safety And it was, but it was also about not being able to let go of something I couldn't find a legitimate reason to hold on to anymore. He paused. I should have given you the distance you asked for. Instead, I kept a key and called a number you didn't give me and watched from far enough away that I could tell myself it wasn't watching. A beat. It was watching. You were right. She looked at him sideways. In 7 months of knowing him, she had never heard him offer an admission that direct. It sat wrong, not because she didn't believe it, but because she did, and believing it required her to recalibrate something she had been using to keep him at a distance. Why, she asked. Because you mattered. Simple. No performance in it. I ended things for reasons I gave myself that felt logical and then turned out to be insufficient when measured against the actual reality of you not being in my life. She stopped walking. He stopped beside her. She searched for the word. That's a very controlled way to say something that sounds like it might be something else. I'm a controlled person. I noticed. It doesn't mean the something else isn't there. She looked at him for a long moment. The morning traffic moved around them like they were a stone in a current, and she stood there with her heart doing something complicated and said, "This is not a romance, Adrien. We are not picking up where we left off. We are two people who are going to be parents, and we need to figure out what that looks like without me losing myself in the process." "Agreed," he said, too quickly. She narrowed her eyes. "You agreed very fast." "Because I do agree. Or because you've decided that agreement is the fastest path to what you actually want." He looked at her, and there was something in his expression, then something that might on a less controlled face have been the beginning of a smile. "You're very good at reading people. I've had practice. With men like me, with people who want things they're not saying out loud." She started walking again. "What do you actually want, Adrien? Not the version you've prepared, the real one." A pause, long enough to be genuine. "I want to know my child," he said. "I want to know them in a real way, not from a distance, not from a security report, not from photographs I'm not supposed to have. I want—" He paused again, longer. "I want what I didn't have. My father was present in the sense that he was in the building. He was never actually there." She hadn't expected that. She hadn't expected any of this morning. She had come downstairs prepared for negotiation, prepared for the version of him that managed and controlled and operated. She had not prepared for the version that talked about his father on a Tuesday morning with the traffic going past and something raw moving underneath the words. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "Don't be." He said it quickly. "I'm not saying it for sympathy. I'm saying it so you understand what I'm asking for. I'm not asking to control your life. I'm asking to be in my child's." A beat. "And in yours if you'll let me. In whatever way makes sense. Whatever way you can live with." She breathed. "That's a lot of whatever," she said. "I'm trying to leave you room." "I noticed. Is it working?" She almost smiled, caught herself. "Don't push it." Xiao. They were sitting in a diner. Her choice deliberately ordinary. A place where the booths were vinyl and the coffee came in heavy mugs, and nobody was going to behave significantly differently because of who he was when his phone rang. He looked at the screen. Something in his face changed. "I have to take this." "Go ahead." He stepped out. She watched him through the window, the posture shift, the way everything about him seemed to sharpen and compress when he was in that mode, the man she had glimpsed but never fully seen during their 3 months. The real architecture of what he was. He came back 4 minutes later, sat down, picked up his coffee. "What?" she said. "Nothing." "Adrien." He looked at her. "It's handled." "What's handled?" A pause. "The Vulov family has been making noise. Nothing that affects you. It's being dealt with." She set her mug down. "The Vulov family," she said carefully. "The same people who—" "Yes. And you're telling me this at a diner over breakfast because you asked me a direct question and I decide to answer it instead of lying." He met her eyes. "You said you wanted the real version." "That is the real version. My world does not pause because I'm here. It runs while I'm here. That is a thing you need to understand about what it means to be connected to me." She stared at him. "You're telling me my child is going to grow up inside that," she said. "Not a question, a reckoning. My child is going to grow up protected from it, he said. There is a difference. Is there? Her voice was sharper now. Because from where I'm sitting, the protection and the danger come from the same source. You can't, Adrien, you can't be both the threat and the shield. That's not, I know. He said it quickly, and the quickness of it meant he had thought about it, that it wasn't a dismissal. I know what that looks like. I know what you're afraid of. But consider, he leaned forward slightly, consider that the alternative is a child who grows up without my protection in a world that will know eventually who their father is. Whether I am in your life or not, that name follows them. My protection is not optional. It is a fact of their existence. The truth of that landed in her chest like something dropped from a height. She hadn't let herself think about it that way. She had thought about escaping his world. She had not thought about the fact that his world might follow her child regardless of whether he was in the room. That's not fair, she said. Bobo, he said. It isn't. Silence, Bum. So you're saying I don't have a choice. I'm saying the choice you have is not between safe and unsafe. It's between safe with me or less safe without me and with my name attached to your child regardless. He looked at her steadily. I would never use that as a threat. I'm telling you because I think you deserve to make decisions with accurate information. You've been making them with incomplete information for 4 months, and look where that got both of us. She wanted to argue. She went looking for the argument and found in its place something that felt uncomfortably like the recognition that he was right. She hated it. I need time, she said. You have it. You'll actually give it to me this time, without the key and the phone calls and I'll give you time, he said. I'm not going anywhere, but I'll give you time. She looked at him across the diner table in the harsh, honest light of a Tuesday morning, with the coffee going cold between them and a future that looked nothing like anything she had planned, and she tried to find the version of this that was simple enough to manage. She couldn't find it. 3 days later, Rita called. I need you to come over, she said. Her voice had that quality the whiskey required quality. Now if you can. What happened? Just come. Natalie was there in 20 minutes. Rita opened the door and in her hand was a photograph. Printed not on a phone, actual printed paper, the kind that meant someone had gone to the effort of making it physical, making it undeniable. Natalie took it. It was her. Outside her building. The date stamp in the corner was 6 days ago, the day before Adrien had appeared in her apartment. She was carrying groceries. Her coat was open. The curve of her stomach was unmistakable. Where did you get this? She asked. It was under my door this morning, Rita said. There was a note with it. She held out the note. 3 words handwritten, no signature. He has a son. Natalie read it twice. Then she looked up at Rita. They don't know it's a girl, she said. Her voice was completely flat. Natalie, they know you're pregnant. They know it's Adrien's. The Vulov family has been making noise, she said it quietly. The words Adrien had used in the diner. Handled, he'd said. Nothing that affects you. Except someone had been outside her building 6 days ago with a camera. Except someone had put a photograph under her best friend's door. Except they knew. You need to call him, Rita said. I know. Right now. I know, Rita. Natalie, Rita grabbed her arm, and the look on her face was the one Natalie had never seen there before, not worry, not the careful concern of a friend who was trying not to frighten you. This was fear, pure and unperformed. Call him right now, because whoever left this knows where I live, which means they know about me, which means Natalie was already dialing. He answered on the first ring. They know, she said. A silence. 2 seconds. In those 2 seconds, she heard the same compression and sharpening she had seen through the diner window, the snap of a man becoming entirely what he was built to be. Where are you, he said. Rita's. Don't move, I'm sending someone to you right now. A pause. Natalie. Look at me, I know you can't see me, but listen. Nothing is going to happen to you. I need you to believe that. Tell me what's happening. Later, right now I need you to stay. Adrien. Her voice cut through sharp and steady, the voice she used when she needed to be heard over the noise. Tell me what is happening. I am carrying your child, and someone has been photographing me outside my building, and you are not going to manage me through this. Tell me. Another silence. Shorter this time, the silence of a man deciding. The Vulovs escalated, he said. faster than we anticipated. They're not just making noise anymore, they're collecting leverage. A pause. You are the leverage. The words hit her in a way she had known abstractly, somewhere in the back of her mind, they would someday hit her. Abstractly was one thing, actually hearing it was another entirely. Your child, she said, slow, precise. Our child is leverage to them. Yes, she closed her eyes. So you were right, she said. About what? About the protection not being optional. She opened her eyes, met Rita's frightened gaze across the room. About this being a fact of their existence, regardless of what I choose. A pause. When he spoke, his voice was different, not the controlled operational voice, not the careful voice from the diner. Something older, something that cost him. I never wanted to be right about that, he said. She believed him. She was terrified that she believed him. What do we do, she asked. For now you come to me, he said, not because I'm taking over your life, because right now it is the only place I can keep you both safe and I need... His voice tightened just briefly, just enough for her to hear it. I need to be able to do that. I need you to let me do that. Rita was watching her, waiting. Natalie stood in Rita's living room with a photograph in one hand and her phone in the other, and a baby who did not know yet what world they had been born into, and she understood completely, without room for argument, that the choice had already been made. Not by her, not by him, by the people who had put a photograph under her best friend's door. Okay, she said. The word was small. The weight of it was not. Okay, she said again. Tell me where to go. She packed in 11 minutes. Not because she was calm. She was not calm, not even close to calm, but because panic, when it reaches a certain pitch, stops feeling like panic and starts feeling like pure function. Her hands moved. Her brain made a list. Her body executed the list. Everything else, the fear, the fury, the particular grief of a woman who had built a careful plan and watched it come apart in real time, all of that went into the same place she put everything she couldn't afford to feel yet. Somewhere in the back, somewhere with a door. Rita stood in the doorway of the bedroom and watched her fold clothes into a bag with the focused efficiency of someone diffusing something. I'm coming with you, Rita said. No. Natalie Bayan, Rita. She looked up. They know where you live because of me. The safest thing for you right now is distance from me. I need you to go to stay with your sister. I'm not leaving you. I'm not asking. She zipped out the bag, looked at her friend, softened just slightly, just enough. Please, please do this one thing. If something happened to you because of me, I wouldn't. She stopped. Please. Rita looked at her for a long moment. Then she crossed the room and put both arms around her, and Natalie stood inside that hug with her eyes closed and her jaw tight, and the bag hanging from her hand, and she let herself have exactly 10 seconds of it before she stepped back. Call me the moment you're safe, Rita said. I will. And Natalie, Rita grabbed her hand, be careful about what you let yourself believe about him. I know how it feels when someone shows up and knows exactly what to say. Just keep your eyes open. I always keep my eyes open. You kept them open for 4 months and still ended up here. She didn't have an answer for that. She left. The car Adrien had sent was already outside, black unmarked, a man behind the wheel who introduced himself as Leo and said nothing after that. She got in, the door closed, they moved. She watched her building disappear behind her and understood in the way you understand certain things only when they are physically receding in the rear window that she was not going back there. Not to that apartment, not to that version of her life. Whatever came next was going to be categorically different from what had come before, and there was nothing to do about that except face forward and decide what kind of person she was going to be inside it. She put her hand on her stomach. Okay, she said quietly, here we go. Leo, to his credit, pretended not to hear. Adrien was waiting at the door when the car pulled up. Not inside. At the door. Outside in the cold, like a man who had been standing there since the moment he'd hung up the phone and had no intention of pretending otherwise. She noticed that he hadn't staged himself behind a desk or in a chair or in any position that suggested distance or authority. He had simply waited the way people wait for things that matter without performance. She got out of the car, stood in front of him. Rita's going to her sister's, she said. Good. I'll have someone keep an eye on her building anyway. She doesn't need to know that. She won't know. He picked up her bag before she could argue about it. Come inside. She followed him and the house, if she was going to call it that, this place that was more architecture than home, all clean lines and security measures wearing the clothing of ordinary rooms, settled around her like something that had been expecting her. A woman named Diane met them in the hallway. 50s efficient, the kind of face that registered everything and reacted to nothing. The East Room is ready, Diane said. Thank you. Adrien set the bag down. Natalie, if you need anything at all, Diane handles this house. I've been handling it for 14 years, Diane said, and there was something almost warm in it, directed at Natalie, the particular warmth of a woman who has seen many things come through a house and has decided this one matters. Can I get you something to eat? I'm okay, thank you. You're not, Diane said pleasantly, but I'll let you say so. The offer stands whenever you change your mind. And then she was gone, and Natalie and Adrien were standing in the hallway alone, and the silence had a different quality now. Not the silence of a bathroom confrontation or a diner negotiation, but the silence of two people who have arrived somewhere new and are not quite sure how to be in it. The East Room is yours, Adrien said, separate from mine. Your space. Nobody enters without your permission, including me. He paused. Especially me. She looked at him. You're being very careful. I'm aware of what it cost you to come here. I'm not going to make it cost more than it already has. She nodded slowly. Then, tell me about the Vulovs. He was quiet for a moment. Then he turned and said, come with me, and led her into a room off the hallway. Not an office, not a formal space, just a room with chairs and a table, and the particular neutrality of a place designed for difficult conversations. He sat. She sat across from him. The Vulov family, he began, has been trying to expand their operation into territory I control for 3 years. It escalated 8 months ago when their eldest son was arrested on federal charges that came from intelligence my people provided. He looked at her directly. They know that. They've been looking for a pressure point ever since. And I'm the pressure point. You became one the moment they identified you as significant to me. A pause, which means they were watching me before you ended things, before I even fully understood what you were to me. She absorbed that. What do they want? What does using me as leverage actually get them? In the short term, they want me to back off certain operations, pull protection from certain people. His voice was steady, but something beneath it was not. In the long term, they want me destabilized. A man with a pregnant woman he's trying to protect is a man whose attention is divided. A man whose attention is divided makes mistakes. So my existence is a tactical liability, she said. Flat, not angry, just clear. Your existence is the most important thing in my life right now, he said, and the simplicity of it stopped her cold. The Vulovs have made you a tactical consideration. Those are not the same thing, and I need you to understand the difference. She looked at him across the table. How serious is the threat, she asked. Serious enough that I moved you tonight. Give me a number. Give me something real. He leaned forward slightly. In the past 72 hours, 2 of their people have been within 2 blocks of your building. The photograph under Rita's door was a message, not a threat to act, but a demonstration of capability. They wanted you to know they could find you. They wanted you frightened. They succeeded, she said without shame. Good, he said. Frightened is appropriate. Frightened keeps you alert. He paused. But frightened and safe are not mutually exclusive. I need you frightened enough to listen to me and safe enough to not carry that fear alone. She was quiet for a moment. Then, what happens now? What's your move? We push back hard in a way that makes the cost of continuing this line of pressure too high to justify mine. He said it the way he said things he had already decided. It will take a few days, maybe a week. And until then, I stay here. Until then, you stay here. She looked around the room, back at him. And you think a week is going to end it. I think a week is going to change the calculation significantly. She heard what wasn't being said. People are going to get hurt. He didn't answer immediately, and the fact that he didn't answer immediately was itself an answer. I don't pretend to be something I'm not, he said finally. You know what I am. You've known for a long time. I could tell you no one gets hurt, and you would know I was lying, and I made you a promise in that diner about real information. I'm keeping it. She breathed. I hate this. I know. I hate all of it. I hate that my child is going to be born into... They're going to be born into safety, he said. Whatever it takes to build that safety, that's on me. Not on you, not on them. That's mine to carry. She looked at him for a long time. You actually believe that, she said. You believe you can build something clean inside something that isn't. I believe I can build a wall around what matters, he paused. I've been building walls my whole life. This is the first time I've had something real to build one around. The room was very quiet. She didn't have a response to that, not one that was honest and also safe, so she said nothing, and he let her say nothing, and the silence between them settled into something that was not comfortable but was at least honest. Mar. She couldn't sleep. She lay in the east room, her room separate, just as he had said, and stared at the ceiling and listened to the house. It was not a quiet house, she discovered. It had its own rhythm, distant voices, footsteps, the occasional low murmur of a phone call, a living thing operating on its own logic around the clock, and she was inside it now, part of its pattern, whether she had chosen to be or not. At 2 a.m, she gave up on sleep and went to find the kitchen. Diane was already there. Tea, Diane said, not looking up from whatever she was reading. Sit down. Natalie sat down. Diane put a mug in front of her without asking what kind, which turned out to be chamomile, which was exactly right. Natalie wrapped both hands around it and looked at the woman across from her. How long have you worked for him? She asked. Since he was 22, Diane said, before he was what he became, when he was still becoming it. A pause. I worked for his father before that. What was his father like? Diane considered the question with the care of someone who has decided that accuracy is worth more than comfort. Effective, she said. Cold. A man who built an empire and expected his son to inherit it the way other men's sons inherit businesses. Without sentiment, without hesitation. A pause. Adrien was never as cold as his father wanted him to be. His father called it a weakness. Is it? Diane looked at her over the reading glasses she had just put on. What do you think? Natalie thought about a man standing outside a building in the cold waiting to be invited in. A man who said together and left when asked and showed up at a diner like a person instead of a force. No, she said. Neither do I. Diane turned a page. Drink your tea. She found out what push back hard looked like on the third morning. She was in the kitchen again. It had become her room in a way, the place she went when the east room got too quiet and her thoughts got too loud when Leo appeared in the doorway with the particular stillness of a man delivering news he has been trained not to react to. There's something Mr. Caruso needs to speak with you about, Leo said. She found Adrien in the room off the hallway. He was standing this time not sitting, and 2 other men were in the room with him, men she hadn't seen before, men whose presence changed the air pressure in a way she couldn't exactly name, but could absolutely feel. Give us a minute, Adrien said to the room. The men left. She looked at him. What happened? Victor Vulov's second in command was picked up this morning, he said. Federal level, information that has been strategically provided. A pause. Victor will know where that information came from, which means the message has been sent. And Victor now has a choice: escalate further or recalculate. He looked at her steadily. I expect him to recalculate. And if he doesn't, then we have a larger conversation. A pause. But I don't think he will. Victor is many things. Stupid isn't one of them. She crossed her arms. You made a move using the federal system. Yes. You have people inside the federal system. I have relationships that are mutually beneficial to several parties, he said, which was a very careful sentence for yes. She stared at him. Do you ever hear yourself? Something moved in his expression, almost that thing that was quieter than amusement, but warmer. Frequently. And I am what I was built to be, he said. I've made peace with that. What I haven't made peace with, he paused, is not being what my child needs me to be. Those 2 things are going to require some navigation. I'm aware of that. She uncrossed her arms slowly. The anger was still there. It was always going to be there. Some version of it, because the things that made him effective were also the things that made him frightening. and she was not going to pretend otherwise. But underneath the anger was something she had been noticing for 3 days and refusing to name. He was trying, not performing trying, actually trying, in the specific, effortful way of a man who is confronting the distance between who he is and who he wants to be, and choosing to cross it regardless of the cost. She sat down. "Tell me about the navigation," she said. He looked at her surprised just slightly, just enough. "Sit down," she said, "and tell me what it actually looks like. Not the plan, not the strategy. What does a life look like for a child born into this where they grow up whole?" He sat across from her, and for the next hour in the room off the hallway with the tea going cold and the rest of the house doing its constant work around them, Adrien Caruso talked to her. Really talked, not managed, not strategized, not calculated about the life he wanted to build inside the one he had inherited. He talked about schools and ordinary weekday mornings and a child who knew their father's voice before they knew their father's reputation. He talked about the kind of man he had decided at some point in the past 3 days that he was going to make himself become. He talked about walls, not the ones he'd built around his empire, but the ones he wanted to build around something smaller and more important. She listened, and when he was done, she said, "That's going to be the hardest thing you've ever done." "Yes," he said, "harder than anything you've built." "Yes, and you want it anyway." He looked at her directly. "I want it more than anything I've built." A pause. "I want what's inside it more." She held his gaze for a moment longer than was strategically wise. Then her phone buzzed on the table between them. Rita's name. She grabbed it. "Rita, are you?" I'm fine. Rita's voice was fast, breathless, pitched at a frequency that meant something had happened. "I'm at my sister's. I'm safe. But Natalie, listen to me." A pause. One beat. "I just got a call from Marcus." "Marcus from the shop. Someone came into the flower shop this morning. 2 men. They asked Margaret about you, where you'd gone, if you'd left anything behind, if she had a forwarding address. And then," Rita's voice dropped, "they left a phone number. They said to tell you that if you want this to end cleanly, you call that number. Without him." Natalie looked across the table at Adrien. He had heard. She could see it in his face, not surprise, but the grim confirmation of something he had calculated for and not wanted to be right about. "Don't call it," he said quietly. "I know," she said. "Natalie." "I said I know." She held the phone tighter. "Rita, are you sure you're safe?" "Yes, I promise." "Stay there. Don't go anywhere near the shop." She paused. "I love you. I love you too." A beat. "Be smart." She hung up, set the phone on the table, looked at Adrien. "They're not recalculating," she said. "Not yet." His voice had changed, entirely flat and operational, the snap of a man who has shifted modes with the practiced ease of long habit. He stood up. "They're testing. They want to know if you'll move independently, if I have full cooperation, or if there's a gap they can use." "Is there?" He looked at her. "Is there?" She understood the question. He wasn't asking if she would call the number. He was asking something larger, whether she was in or out, whether she was with him or simply near him, whether the last 3 days had built something or merely maintained a temporary arrangement. She thought about the photograph under Rita's door. She thought about 2 men in a flower shop asking questions about her. She thought about a child who was not yet born, who had not yet chosen anything, who was going to grow up in a world that had already decided to use them. She thought about a man who had stood outside her building in the cold rather than knock on the door. "There's no gap," she said. His shoulders shifted just slightly, just enough for her to see what it meant. "Good," he said. "Don't make me regret that." "I won't. I mean it, Adrien." She stood up, looked at him eye to eye. "I am not a woman who gives trust twice. If you break this, if you lie to me, if you manage me, if you make decisions about my life without me, I will take my child, and I will find a way to disappear that even you won't be able to undo. Do you understand me?" A pause, long enough to be genuine. "I understand you," he said. "Good." She picked up her phone. "Now tell me everything you know about Viktor Vulov, all of it. Because if I'm in, I'm actually in. I don't operate on partial information anymore." He looked at her for a moment, And in that moment, the thing she saw in his face was something she had never quite seen there before. Not control, not calculation, not the careful management of a man who has spent his whole life making sure no one gets too close. Something that looked against every reasonable expectation, like respect. "Sit down," he said. She sat, and he told her everything. Everything Adrien told her took 2 hours and 20 minutes. She knew because she watched the clock on the wall behind his head, not out of impatience, but because she needed something fixed and ordinary to anchor herself to, while the world she had been pretending didn't exist assembled itself in front of her in full detail. The Vulov family had been operating in the city for 19 years. 3 brothers, Victor the oldest, the strategist, Dmitri the middle, the enforcer, Pavel the youngest, currently in federal custody on charges that Adrien's intelligence had helped build. The arrest of Pavel had not weakened them the way Adrien had anticipated. It had instead done something more dangerous. It had made them personal about it. "Victor doesn't make personal decisions," Adrien said. "That's what made him manageable for 3 years. He's a businessman. He calculates risk and reward, and he moves accordingly. But Dmitri," he paused. "Dmitri has always been the variable." "What does that mean?" "It means Victor might recalculate. Dmitri will not." He looked at her steadily. "Dmitri is the one who sent the photograph. That wasn't Victor's move, too emotional, too direct. That was Dmitri telling his brother that patience is finished. So there are 2 different problems. And there are 2 different men making 2 different calculations, and they're about to start disagreeing with each other about how to handle this." A pause, which is either an opportunity or a catastrophe, depending on how the next 72 hours go. She absorbed that. "And you have a plan for both outcomes?" "I have a plan for both outcomes. Tell me," he told her. She listened the way she had listened to everything in the past 3 days completely, without interrupting, storing it all in the precise and orderly way her mind had always worked. The quality that had made her good at every job she'd ever held, and was apparently also useful when learning the operational details of a war she had been accidentally conscripted into. When he was done, she said, "The weak point is the timeline. If Dmitri moves before Victor has a chance to see the calculation, your leverage disappears." He looked at her. "Yes. So the 72 hours is actually more like 48. "Yes. And you were going to tell me that when exactly," a pause, shorter than it should have been. "I was working up to it." "You were managing it," she said, "not accusing, naming. You were deciding how much to tell me and in what order, and you were going to arrive at the 48 hours last because you knew I'd push back on the timeline." He didn't answer. "Adrien." "Yes," he said, flat, honest. "You're right. We had a conversation about this." "We did. Do you want me to repeat the part about trust?" "No." He met her eyes directly. "You're right. The timeline is 48 hours. Possibly less. I should have led with that." She held his gaze for a moment. "Let the silence do its work. Then what do you need from me?" He blinked, just slightly, like that wasn't the question he'd been expecting. "What? In the next 48 hours, what do you need from me specifically? Because I'm not going to sit in the East Room and wait to find out what happens. I'm in this. You know I'm in this, so use me. You're 20 weeks pregnant. I'm also the only person in this house who has a completely unknown face to the Vulov organization." She paused, watched the thought land on him. "They photographed me outside my building. They know I exist and that I matter to you. They don't know what I look like up close. They don't know my last name. They don't know anything about me except that I'm carrying your child." She leaned forward. "That is an asset if you're willing to see it that way." He was very quiet. "You're not going anywhere near them," he said. "I'm not suggesting that. I'm suggesting that there might be ways to use what I know and what I look like to give you information." A pause. "I'm not fragile, Adrien. I'm pregnant. There is a difference." He looked at her for a long time, the look of a man doing rapid calculations he wishes he didn't have to do. "Let me think about it," he said. She knew what that meant. She decided to let it mean that for now. The call came at 11 that night. She heard it through the wall, not the words, just the tone, the particular compression of his voice that meant something had shifted. She was awake anyway, lying in the east room with her hand on her stomach and her mind going in 8 directions at once, and when she heard footsteps stop outside her door, she was already sitting up. A knock, quiet, careful. "Come in," she said. He opened the door but didn't enter. Stood at the threshold, respecting the boundaries she noticed even now, even with whatever was on his face. "Victor called," he said. She waited. "He wants a meeting. Neutral ground, tomorrow." He paused. "Just me and him, no seconds." "You're not going alone." "I've done this before." "I'm sure you have." She swung her legs over the side of the bed. "But this is Dimitri's escalation, which means Victor is trying to get ahead of his own brother, which means this meeting might be Victor's attempt to resolve it before Dimitri does something that can't be undone." She looked at him. "Or it's a trap." He looked at her. "You already know that," she said. "Yes." "And you're going anyway." "Yes." She stood up. They were the same height when she was in flat feet, and he was slightly across the room, and she was looking at him with the specific focus of a woman who has decided that fear is not an acceptable reason to stop thinking clearly. "What's your read on Victor?" she asked. "Tired," Adrien said after a moment. "Victor is 61 years old. He has been running a criminal organization for 2 decades, and his youngest brother just got arrested, and his middle brother is becoming a liability. He called me tonight, which means he's trying to find a door before Dimitri burns the building down." A pause. "I think he wants out of this particular conflict. I think he's willing to pay something to get it." "And what's the something?" "That's what the meeting is." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "If it's not a trap, if Victor actually wants to negotiate, then you going alone makes sense. You're equals at that table, and a second makes it look like you don't trust his gesture." "Correct. But if Dimitri knows about the meeting, then it becomes something else. So the question is whether Victor has told Dimitri." "Yes." "And you don't know?" "No." She looked at him. He looked back. The house was quiet around them, that particular 2 a.m. quiet that makes everything feel both more urgent and more fragile than it does in daylight. "I'll be fine," he said. "That's not what I was going to say." "What were you going to say?" "I was going to say," she paused, found the words, "come back. Whatever happens tomorrow, make sure you come back." The room was very still. She hadn't planned to say it. It had arrived without announcement, the way certain true things do not decided upon, but simply discovered already present, waiting for the moment you stop being careful enough to contain them. He looked at her for a moment that lasted longer than a moment. "I'll come back," he said. "Promise me." He crossed the threshold. 2 steps. Stopped directly in front of her, and he reached out slowly, carefully, giving her every opportunity to step back and put one hand against the side of her face. "I promise," he said. She didn't step back. Wow. He left at 9 the next morning. She watched the car pull away, and then she turned to Leo, who was standing 6 feet behind her with the particular professional neutrality of a man whose job is to make himself invisible while remaining completely present. "You're staying here," Leo said. "I know." Mr. Caruso was very specific. "I'm sure he was." She turned away from the window. "I want to know the moment you hear from him. Not a summary, actual word." "Yes, ma'am." She went to find Diane. So, the morning was the longest of her life. She sat in the kitchen and drank tea she didn't taste and ate toast she didn't want because Diane put it in front of her with the quiet authority of a woman who knows that a pregnant person skipping meals is not a negotiation she is prepared to lose. She checked her phone every 4 minutes. She checked it again. She put it face down on the table and looked at it face down for 3 minutes and then picked it up again. "He's done this before," Diane said without looking up from the counter. "I know. He's been doing this for 6 years and hasn't lost yet. There's a first time for everything." Diane looked at her then. "He is going to come back," she said. Flat, certain, not comforting, factual. "Not because I'm trying to make you feel better, because that man has more reasons to come back today than he has ever had in 6 years, and that matters. Reasons matter." A pause. "You matter." Natalie looked at her. "He talked about you," Diane said simply. "Before, when you had ended things. He didn't say much because he doesn't. But what he said," she paused, choosing. He said your name the way people say the name of something they were trying not to want anymore. She didn't answer. She didn't have an answer. She picked up her tea and looked at it and put it back down. Eat the toast, Diane said. She ate the toast. Amen. The call came at 1:17 in the afternoon. Not from Adrien, from Leo, who appeared in the kitchen doorway with a phone in his hand and an expression she couldn't immediately read. What happened? She said immediately. The meeting happened, Leo said carefully. Mr. Caruso is on his way back. She exhaled so completely her whole body moved with it. But, she said, because there was a but, she could hear it in the pause. Dimitri was there, Leo said. It was not a neutral meeting. She stood up. Is he hurt? No, but Dimitri made a statement. Leo paused again. He brought photographs of you, of this house, taken this morning. The cold came back, immediate, total. This morning, she said, while he was at the meeting. Yes. Which meant while Adrien was at the table with Victor, Dimitri had someone outside this house. While the meeting was happening, while Adrien was walking into what he thought was a negotiation, Dimitri had been demonstrating that he already knew exactly where she was. He was never going to negotiate, she said. Mr. Caruso's assessment as well. Leo met her eyes. He'll be back in 20 minutes. 20 minutes. She sat back down, picked up her phone, put it down, picked it up again, and called Rita. Are you still at your sister's? She said the moment it connected. Yes, I'm here. I'm fine. What happened? Nothing yet. Stay there. Don't go back to your apartment. A pause. Rita, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer me honestly. Always. If I told you I think I'm falling, she stopped, started again. If I told you that I'm looking at this man and it is significantly more complicated than I planned for it to be, what would you tell me? A silence, the kind Rita used when she was being careful. I would tell you, Rita said slowly, that complicated and wrong are not the same thing. I would tell you that fear is a reasonable response to love when the love comes from a place that scares you. A pause. And I would tell you that you have always been the most stubborn person I know about accepting anything you didn't plan for, which usually serves you well. A longer pause. This might be the exception. She was quiet. Or, Rita said gently, I would tell you that you're in a very intense situation with elevated emotions and hormones and genuine danger, and maybe all of that together feels like something it isn't. Which one do you actually believe? I don't know, Rita said honestly, but you do. You've always known. You're just afraid to trust yourself on this one. She heard the front door. He's back, she said. I have to go. Natalie, I'll call you tonight. She was already moving. He came through the door and she was in the hallway and they looked at each other across 12 feet of space and she could see it immediately. The tension in him, not physical, but structural. The look of a man who has just watched the situation become significantly more dangerous than he accounted for and is currently deciding how much of that to say. I'm fine, he said. I know, Leo told me. She crossed her arms. Dimitri was there. Yes. With photographs of this house taken this morning. Yes. So he knew about the meeting before Victor called it. Adrien's jaw tightened, just slightly. Yes, I believe Victor reached out to me in good faith. I believe Dimitri intercepted the contact and decided to use the meeting to send his own message. Which is what exactly by fictional? That he is not interested in a resolution. That he intends to take this to the end. Adrien paused. And that he knows where you are. She uncrossed her arms. So we can't stay here. Not for more than another 12 hours. Where do we go? He looked at her the look of a man preparing for the argument he'd been steeling himself for in the car. I have a property, he said, outside the city, secure off any record that Dimitri could access. How far outside the city? 4 hours. And my doctor's appointment is in 3 days. I know, I'm all ready. Don't tell me you're already handling it. She kept her voice level. Tell me what that means specifically. Tell me who my doctor is going to think I am and how you've arranged it and what happens if something goes wrong medically in the middle of. There is a physician at the property, he said, fully qualified. He handles medical situations for he is good at what he does. Your prenatal care will not be compromised. She stared at him. You have a live-in doctor. It's useful. I'm sure it is. She pressed her fingers against her forehead. This is insane. This is genuinely insane, and I am living inside it. I know. I packed one bag. I packed one bag for a few days, and I appear to be entering a situation that requires whatever you need, he said immediately. Anything, everything, you name it, and it's there when we arrive. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she dropped her hand from her forehead and exhaled and said, Okay. Okay. And how long? Okay, 4 hours, the property. But Adrien, she waited until he met her eyes. Rita comes. Natalie. She is alone in her sister's apartment, being kept there because of me. If Dimitri knows where this house is, he can find her. She comes with us, or I start having serious concerns about this arrangement. He was quiet for 3 seconds. I'll send someone for her. Now. Now, he agreed. She turned toward the hallway, then stopped. Turned back. The meeting, she said. When Dimitri showed you those photographs, what did he say? Exactly. Adrien was quiet for a moment. The kind of quiet that means the answer is not a simple one. He paused, and he said that a man with something to protect is a man who will eventually protect it at the cost of everything else. He said that I would give him what he wanted, or he would make sure I spent the rest of my life knowing what it costs to tell him no. She absorbed that. He said it directly in front of Victor. In front of Victor. What did Victor do? Adrien looked at her. Mommy, he said, quiet, significant. Victor did nothing. She understood what that meant. Victor wasn't tired. Victor had stepped aside. The calculation she and Adrien had built the past 3 days on the idea that Victor would choose resolution over escalation had been wrong. Not because Victor wanted war, because Victor had already lost control of his brother and had decided that distance from the outcome was preferable to resistance. You were wrong about Victor, she said to him. Yes. Which changes the entire plan. Yes. And you now have, she checked the clock on the wall, 12 hours before we have to move, and a plan that needs to be rebuilt from the beginning, and Dimitri who knows where we are. Yes. She looked at him. He looked back at her, and in that moment, stripped of strategy and calculation, she saw what was underneath all of it. Not fear, something older and more human than fear. The look of a man who has brought someone he loves into the blast radius of his own life and is living with the weight of that in real time. She walked toward him. He went very still. She stopped directly in front of him and put one hand flat against his chest, not an embrace, not a claim, just contact. The specific kind of contact that means I'm here, and I know, and you don't have to hold all of this by yourself right now. She felt his heartbeat under her palm. Fast, not steady. We're going to figure it out, she said. He put his hand over hers. I know, he said. But she heard what was underneath it, the thing he hadn't said, the thing she suspected he might not have said to another living person in years. I'm afraid, not of Dimitri, not of the war, of this, of her, of the child, of the specific and catastrophic vulnerability of having something you cannot protect with money or weapons or strategy alone. Something that requires you to simply be enough, to simply be present, to simply, against every instinct built into you over a lifetime of operating at a distance from ordinary human feeling, show up. She kept her hand where it was. He kept his over it. Outside, Leo was already on the phone. Somewhere across the city, a car was turning toward Rita's sister's apartment. In the East Room, the bag she'd packed in 11 minutes was waiting. And somewhere 4 hours north, a property that didn't exist on any record Dimitri could find was waiting too. 12 hours. She thought about a woman who had packed a bag in 11 minutes. A woman who had said okay to the one thing she had spent 4 months running from because the running had become more dangerous than the standing still. She thought about everything she'd said to Rita on the phone, the almost sentence, the thing she hadn't finished. If I told you I think I'm falling. She looked up at him, he looked down at her, and she thought, maybe that's the most honest thing I've said out loud in 4 months. She didn't say it yet. She filed it in the place where things go when they're true but not yet ready to be spoken. Somewhere in the back, somewhere without a door this time. Get Leo, she said. Tell him we move in 6 hours instead of 12. Don't give Dimitri any more time than we have to. Adrien looked at her, nodded once. And Adrien. She stepped back. Next time you go into a meeting and the situation changes, you call me. In real time. No summaries, no managed delivery. You call me. You'll be worried. I'm already worried. The difference is whether I'm worried with information or without it. She held his gaze. I told you I don't operate on partial information anymore. That goes both ways. A pause, then quietly, genuinely, the voice of a man who is learning something new and is not too proud to let it show. Okay, he said. She nodded, turned toward the hallway. Natalie. She looked back. He was standing exactly where she'd left him, one hand slightly extended from where hers had been, the ghost of the contact still in the air between them. Thank you, he said. Simple. No performance in it. She looked at him for one more moment. Then she went to pack the rest of her things, and the clock on the wall read 2:41 in the afternoon. And somewhere in the city, Dmitry Vulov was making his own calculations. And somewhere 4 hours north, a door was waiting to be opened, and the life she had never planned was moving underneath her like a current. She had finally, after everything, stopped fighting. They left at 8:40 that evening, not 6 hours. Something came up at 4:30 that compressed the timeline further, a call Leo took in the kitchen that lasted 90 seconds and left him walking straight to Adrien with a face that said everything before his mouth opened. Natalie was in the hallway with her bag when she saw the exchange, and she didn't wait to be told. How long do we have? She said. Adrien turned to her. 2 hours, maybe less. Then we go now. They went now. Rita arrived 20 minutes before they left, delivered by one of Adrien's men, carrying a bag she had clearly packed in less time than Natalie had, wearing the face of a woman who has been frightened long enough that the fright has calcified into something harder and more useful. She walked through the door, looked at Natalie, looked at Adrien, looked back at Natalie. You okay, Rita said. Getting there. Good enough. Rita adjusted her bag on her shoulder. Let's go. They moved in 2 cars, Natalie and Rita in the first, with Leo driving Adrien in the second, with 2 men Natalie had seen around the house but never spoken to. She understood why without asking. If Dmitry had people watching, splitting the cars created uncertainty about which one to follow. Simple logic. Cold logic, the kind that worked. She watched the city give way to highway, and highway give way to the dark, and beside her, Rita held her hand without saying anything, which was exactly the right thing to do. Are you scared? Rita asked after a long while. Yes, Natalie said. Are you sure about him, Oid? A pause, longer than she intended. I'm sure, she said, that I stopped being able to pretend I'm not in love with him sometime around the 2nd day in that house, and I haven't figured out what to do with that yet. Rita was quiet for a moment. Then she squeezed her hand. Well, Rita said, at least you're honest about it now. I've always been honest. You've always been honest with me. Being honest with yourself is a different skill. A pause. Does he know? She thought about a hand over hers in the hallway. A promise made in a doorway at 2 a.m. The way he had said her name across every distance they had put between themselves, with a weight that did not sound like a man who had moved on. Not yet, she said. Okay. Rita leaned her head back. Tell him before the baby comes. That's my only advice. Don't let that child arrive in a room full of people who haven't said the real thing yet. She didn't answer, but she filed it somewhere she planned to keep it. Sure. The property was exactly what Adrien had described, and nothing like she had imagined. She had imagined something fortress-like, walls, gates, the aesthetic of a place that announced its own security. Instead, it was quiet, understated in the way that only very secure things can afford to be understated, because they have nothing left to prove. Adrien was out of the second car before it fully stopped. He appeared at her door, opened it himself, not waiting for Leo, and offered his hand to help her out, which she took because her back had been aching for the past hour, and pride was a luxury she was currently not in a position to afford. He kept her hand for 3 seconds longer than the assistance required. She noticed. She didn't mention it. The doctor is here, he said. His name is Reeves. He'd like to see you tonight if you're up to it, just to check, nothing alarming. I'm fine. I know, he'd still like to see you. She looked at him. He looked back. Okay, she said. Dr. Reeves was 60, matter-of-fact, and had the specific quality of a person who has seen so many unusual situations that absolutely nothing registers as unusual anymore. He checked her over with professional efficiency, listened to the heartbeat, made notes, and said, Everything looks good, with the same energy someone might use to report adequate weather. The baby's moving well, he said. Heart rate is excellent. You've been under significant stress. Yes. Try not to be. She stared at him. That's your medical advice. It's my best available medical advice given the circumstances. He snapped his bag shut. Sleep. Eat regularly. If you feel anything unusual, come find me immediately. Otherwise, you're doing well. He left. She sat on the edge of the bed in the room that was now hers and put both hands on her stomach and listened to the silence of a house that was not the house she'd left in a life that was not the life she'd had 3 weeks ago, carrying a child who was going to arrive into all of it, regardless of how ready she was. I know, she said quietly to no one. To someone. I know, I'm working on it. A knock at the door. Come in? Adrien entered, stopped a few feet in. Reeves said everything is good. He told me the same. Are you? I'm okay. She looked at him. Sit down. I want to talk to you. He sat in the chair across from her. She looked at him, this man, this specific impossible man who had appeared in her doorway with a key she hadn't given him and turned her entire careful life inside out. And she thought about Rita's voice in the car. Tell him before the baby comes. I need to say something, she said. Okay. And I need you to not say anything until I'm done, because if you say something in the middle, I'm going to lose the thread and then it won't get said. He nodded. I have been afraid of you, she said. Not of what you do not exactly. Afraid of what I feel about you, because feeling things about you is not safe in the simple, containable way that feelings are supposed to be. Feeling things about you has consequences. It always has. She paused. I ended things last year because I looked at my life and your life, and I could not find a version where those two things existed together without one of them being consumed by the other. I was afraid it was going to be mine. A pause. I still have that fear. He was very still. But somewhere in the past 2 weeks, she paused. Somewhere between a key I didn't give you and a diner booth and a phone call, in the middle of the night and your hand over mine in the hallway, I stopped being able to pretend that fear is bigger than everything else. She held his gaze. I love you. I know what that means in the context of what you are and what your world is, and I'm not asking you to become something different, and I'm not telling you this so you'll promise me things you can't keep. I'm telling you because Rita told me to be honest before this baby arrives, and she is almost always right. She exhaled. That's it. That's what I wanted to say. The silence lasted 4 full seconds. Then Adrien Caruso, who had built an empire on the management of information and the control of outcomes, leaned forward in the chair and put his elbows on his knees and looked at her with the most unguarded face she had ever seen on him and said, I have been in love with you since you laughed at a joke you interrupted yourself to make at a bar at a charity gala 7 months ago. His voice was low, not performed, just true. I have thought about that laugh in every difficult room I've been in since. I ended things, or I accepted it when you ended it, because I believed you would be safer without the association. Because I believed the right thing was the distance, Itobash said. I was wrong. The distance made you less safe and cost me the only thing I have ever wanted that wasn't about power or protection or control. He looked at her directly. I love you. I've been loving you this whole time. I just didn't think I had the right to say it until I could say it in a room where you weren't being used against me and I wasn't offering it as a transaction. She looked at him. Neither of them spoke. Then she said, That's the most honest thing you've ever said to me. I'm working on being more honest. I noticed. A beat. Don't stop. The night passed without incident. That was the thing about waiting. It had its own particular quality. A held-breath tension that was almost worse than the thing itself, because at least the thing itself gave you something to push against. She slept in fragments, woke at 2, woke at 4, lay in the dark, and listened to the house, and thought about everything that had been said and everything that was still coming. At 6 in the morning, Adrien knocked. She was already awake. Come in. He sat on the edge of the chair. He had not slept. She could see it clearly, the specific look of a man who has spent the night with his phone and his calculations and his responsibilities, all of which continued operating regardless of what had been said in this room the previous evening. Tell me, she said. Leo got word an hour ago. Dimitri made a move last night. He paused. He went after one of my men, not to hurt him, to send a message. He left him with a number to call. A pause. The number was mine. She sat up straighter. He's calling directly. Yes. That means he's stepping out from behind Victor. Yes. A pause. Victor called me at 5 this morning. He wanted me to know that Dimitri acted without his sanction. He said, Adrien's voice was carefully neutral, that he is unable to control his brother any further, that whatever happens next is between Dimitri and me. She stared at him. Victor just removed himself. Victor just removed himself, Adrien confirmed, which means there are no rules left. There are the rules I make, he said, and the rules Dimitri makes, and tomorrow we find out which ones survive. She was quiet for a moment. Are you going to call the number? I have to. When? This morning. She looked at him. I want to be in the room. Natalie, I'm not asking to participate. I'm asking to be present. She held his gaze. You said we do this together. This is together. A pause, then, okay. Bar. The call happened at 9:17. She sat across the table from him and said nothing and watched his face and listened. Dmitry Vulov's voice came through the phone speaker, low-accented, carrying the particular cadence of a man who enjoys the sound of his own deliberateness, and said words that arranged themselves in Natalie's chest like something physical. He wanted two things. He wanted the territory Adrien controlled at the North Port, and he wanted Adrien's confirmation on record, in a format Dmitri could use, that the federal case against Pavel had been influenced by Caruso intelligence. If he got those two things, Natalie and her child would never be touched. If he didn't get them, Dmitri said calmly and without evident emotion, then the leverage he currently held would be converted into something more active. The call lasted 4 minutes. When it ended, the room was very quiet. She looked at Adrien. You're not giving him either of those things. No. And then what did you do? He looked at the phone on the table for a moment. Then he looked at her, and she saw it, the same thing she had seen in the hallway the night before, that stripped, unguarded quality. Except it had something else in it now, something that had been decided. I'm going to end this, he said, went the way Dmitri expects, not by matching his escalation. He paused. Victor removed himself this morning, which means he's aware of what Dmitri is about to do. Victor is still a rational man. Victor doesn't want what Dmitri is building. A pause. Victor and I have done business in various forms for 11 years, before his brother became what he became. She watched him. You're going to go around Dmitri. I'm going to give Victor a choice, a real one, not a negotiation, a choice between protecting his brother and protecting everything else he's spent his life building. He looked at her directly. Dmitri is reckless enough to blow everything up. Victor is not. The question is whether Victor loves his empire more than he loves his brother. And you think he does. Think he already showed me the answer this morning when he called to tell me he couldn't control Dmitri anymore. That wasn't a warning, Adrien paused. That was permission. The word landed. She absorbed it, turned it over. Then, what does permission mean specifically? It means that Victor has already made his choice. He just needed to make sure I understood it before he formally stepped away. She looked at him for a long moment. This is going to end badly for Dmitri. Yes. And you're sure about what that means? He held her gaze. I don't ask you to approve of what I am. I never have. I ask you to trust that what I protect is worth the cost of how I protect it. A pause. Can you do that? She thought about a child who was not yet born. She thought about a photograph under a door. She thought about two men in a flower shop asking questions about a woman who just wanted to live a quiet life and had been found anyway. She thought about the fact that the danger had existed before she knew about it and would exist regardless of what she chose, and that the only real variable was whether she was inside the protection or outside it. Yes, she said, I can do that. He nodded once, picked up the phone, made the call to Victor. She sat across from him and listened to a conversation she understood only partly and did not need to understand fully, and she watched the face of a man handling the enormous machinery of his world with the specific competence of someone who has done it for a long time and has never until now had a reason to want to put it down. The call lasted 11 minutes. When it ended, Adrien set the phone on the table and then looked at her and said two words, "It's done, fun." She didn't find out the details of what Doan meant for Dmitry Vulov until 3 days later, when Leo told her quietly that Dmitry had been taken into federal custody on charges that had been, in Leo's careful language, pending for some time. She did not ask how long they had been pending or who had ensured they became suddenly active. She had made her peace with the category of question she was not going to ask, and this was one of them. What she knew was this: the photograph stopped. The surveillance stopped. The number Dmitry had left went unanswered because Dmitry was no longer in a position to call it. And Viktor Vulov, 61 years old and evidently done with the particular exhaustion of trying to hold an empire together with a brother who wanted to burn it, sent a single message through an intermediary that contained no words, only the transfer of a business interest delivered quietly that represented everything Dmitry had been demanding and was now Victor's way of closing a door. "He's paying you," Natalie said when Adrien told her. "He's buying distance," Adrien said, from what his brother almost started, from the federal attention that would have followed. A pause. "It's not generosity, it's accounting. It's over." He looked at her. "For now." "For now," she repeated. "That's the honest version." "That's the honest version," he said. "There will always be a next thing. There will always be someone who decides I'm worth the risk of challenging. That doesn't go away." He paused. "What changes is who I have standing next to me when it comes." She looked at him for a moment. Then she laughed, a real one, the uncontrolled kind, the kind that arrived without permission and left her slightly breathless. He looked startled. "What? I'm sorry, it's just..." She pressed her hand against her mouth. 7 months ago, I walked into you carrying flowers, and now I'm sitting in a house that doesn't exist on any record, 4 hours from my city, having a conversation about the permanent nature of organized crime as a feature of my life." And I laughed. She looked at him. "I don't know what that means." "I think it means you're okay," he said. "I think it means I've lost my mind. Those aren't mutually exclusive." She laughed again. He almost smiled, that thing quieter than a smile, warmer than anything else he showed the world. Rita left 4 days later. She stood at the door with her bag hugged. Natalie, for a long time, looked at Adrien over Natalie's shoulder with the specific expression of a woman conducting a final assessment, and apparently found what she needed to find because she nodded once, short final, in his direction. "You heard her," Rita said, "and I will find ways to make your life complicated that have nothing to do with organized crime. Are we clear?" "We're clear," Adrien said. "Good." She looked back at Natalie. "Call me every day." "Every day," Natalie promised. Rita left. The door closed, and the house settled into quiet, a different quiet from before, a quiet with more room in it, the quiet of a space that has stopped bracing for the next thing and has begun cautiously to become something other than a fortress. On the last evening of the 4th week, they were sitting in the kitchen. Her kitchen now, in the specific way that rooms become yours when you've cried in them and eaten in them and had conversations in them that rearranged something permanent when she felt it. Not the flutter, something bigger, something definitive. She grabbed his hand without thinking, reached across the table and grabbed it and put it flat against her stomach before she had consciously decided to do it. He went completely still, and then he felt it. She watched his face, watched the entire architecture of Adrien Caruso, the man who had built an empire on control and calculation, the man who had walked into every room of his life as the most prepared person in it, come apart completely and silently in the span of 4 seconds. Not grief, not fear. Something she had never seen there before and suspected he had never let himself feel before, because to feel it was to become vulnerable in a way that no amount of empire building or wall building or careful management could protect against. He looked up at her. His eyes were bright. He didn't say anything. She didn't say anything either. There was nothing to say that the moment hadn't already said better. But the months that followed were not simple. She had not expected simple. Simple was not the deal she had made when she stood in that bathroom and said, "It's yours," to a man whose world would never be entirely ordinary. There were days she was angry, genuinely, cleanly angry at the constraints of a life that required security and discretion, and the constant low hum of awareness that the world she loved had edges she would spend her life learning to navigate. There were days she called Rita and said things she could not say inside the house, And Rita listened and said the right things and reminded her when she needed reminding that complicated and wrong were not the same thing. There were also days that were so ordinary she forgot to be afraid. Days when Adrien made coffee badly and she showed him how to make it properly, and he made it badly again on purpose, just to watch her reaction. Days when Diane made her eat things she didn't want and then apologized by leaving something sweet outside her door. Days when she woke up to a hand on her stomach and a man who had stayed awake in the night and was trying to explain why and couldn't find the words and didn't need to. Her daughter was born on a Tuesday, 7 pounds, 2 ounces. A sound like an opinion, loud and immediate, and entirely certain of her own importance. Adrien held her first before Natalie even asked, because the nurse put her in his arms, and he stood there in the middle of a room that smelled like antiseptic and everything new, and held this child with his entire body, not a careful hold, not a managed hold, but the hold of a man who is terrified and present and certain all at once that this is the most important thing he has ever done. He looked up at Natalie. She looked at him. Sophia, she said. They had agreed on the name 2 months earlier on a quiet evening that had felt like the first genuinely peaceful moment of the entire year. Sophia, he said, testing the weight of it, learning it. The baby made her opinion sound again. She's loud, Rita said from the corner, delighted. She's ours, Natalie said. And she meant it the way you mean things when they've been earned not easily, not by accident, not by any version of the path she had planned for herself, but by the specific and irreplaceable route of a woman who had been found by the thing she was running from and had made the choice in the end to stand still. Adrien looked at her across the room. Their daughter in his arms, their future in every direction, their past 4 months of fear and silence and crackers at 3 a.m, and eviction notices and photographs under doors, and 2 men in a flower shop and bathroom floors and diner booths, and a promise in a doorway at 2 a.m, and he said her name the way he had always said it, like it was the only word he was entirely certain of. She said, I know. He said, thank you. And she said, because it was true, because it had been true for longer than she had admitted, because Sophia was in his arms and the door to the back of her mind was finally permanently standing open. Don't thank me. Just stay. He looked at her. I'm not going anywhere, he said. And for the first time in the entire length of their story, from a back hallway and a vase of white orchids to a bathroom, in a silence that lasted 4 seconds, to a kitchen table and a hand pressed flat against a stomach. In the dark, she believed him, without reservation, without caveat, without the braced and careful part of herself standing sentinel at the edge of it. Well, she believed him the way you believe things that have been proven not promised, the way you believe things that have cost something real to become true. Sophia made her sound again, louder this time, more insistent, a whole person already announcing herself to a world she had just arrived in, and Natalie laughed and Adrien almost smiled, and Rita said something from the corner that made them both look at her, and the room was full of the particular noise of a life beginning. Not the life Natalie had planned. The one she had built out of fear and stubbornness, in love, and the specific courage it takes to stand still when everything in you is running, and found on the other side of all of it to be the one she was always gunning to end up in. The one that was against every reasonable expectation entirely hers.